All right, good evening, everybody. This is the regular monthly board meeting of the Downers Grove Grade School District Board of Education, Monday, January 13th, 2020 at 7 p.m. at the Downers Grove Village Hall. Melissa, will you please call roll?
Member Doshi.
Here.
Member Hannis. Here. Member Harris.
Here.
Member Olczyk.
Here.
Member Samanti. Here. Member Weiner. Here. Member Hughes.
Here. As a reminder, members of the audience will have an opportunity to provide public comment to the board later on in the agenda. The board asks anyone wishing to comment to please fill out a card located over there, and please indicate the topic that you would like to be addressed. This is a great opportunity to make sure that we allocate enough time for everyone to speak, as well give us an opportunity to follow up with anyone that does speak, since we cannot engage in a dialogue. These can be placed in the basket over there to my right. Kicking us off today is going to be Kingsley School, leading us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have our student council supervisors here with us tonight, Ms. Ashley DeBunsick and Ms. Carly Boyle. And we have four fine gentlemen here with us this evening who are going to introduce themselves to you and tell you a little bit about what we've been up to with student council this year.
Before they get started, we are so proud of all our students at Kingsley, and this group of gentlemen really do a wonderful job leading our school to do some wonderful things for our small community and the community at large. You'll see a little clips video we made, and just a little, you want to show it now? Can we show it now? Okay, we're going to show you a quick video, and then we'll explain what's on video today.
I love this school so much. One of the main things I love about it are the students. They're always really kind and always there for each other.
Hi, I'm Brady Dillon, Kingsley Student Council Vice President. This year, we raised about $1,500 for childhood cancer awareness the week of November 11th. We are really proud of all Kingsley donors and the amount we raised for this cause. That's what I love about Kingsley's community. It's a selfless and charitable community.
Hi, I'm Jackson, Kingsley Student Council Secretary. This year we did a giving trip. It was an opportunity for our school to help families in the Kingsley area. It works something like this. Kids take an ornament off the tree with the person's age, clothing size, and a hobby. Then the kid and their parents went out and bought some things for them. This is one of the things I love about our school so much. All the ornaments on the tree were taken off and all the gifts were given. That shows how awesome our Kingsley students and families are.
Hi, I'm Nico Falera, Kingsley's Student Council Treasurer. This year, we will be fundraising for the Juvenile Diabetic Research Foundation, also known as JDRF, an organization that collects money to find a cure for diabetes. We will be collecting money, and on one of those days, we will do a walk around the school. Depending on what grade you're in, we will walk the corresponding number of laps. If you're in 6th grade, you do 6, 5th you do 5, and so on. We are working to turn type 1 to type 9. One of the many things I love about Kingsley School the fact that there are so many staff members that are very supportive and always there for me.
As most of you have already heard, there are many wildfires in Australia. We plan to start a fund for the helpless animals. We are donating to an organization called the International Fund for Animal Welfare, where they will help all of the animals, where they will help as many animals as they can in Australia. Thank you for your time.
I have to tell you guys that these four gentlemen, along with the student council supervisors, have spent literally many days during lunch and recess practicing for today. So we couldn't be prouder of you guys.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, I'm going to jump into my portion, which is really spending some time here focusing on some updates for the strategic goals that we've been working on. I'm going to start with strategic goal 1, focus on learning. Specifically with reading and math, with those key performance indicators in year 1. And again, we know that we do have access to that winter data, which Justin Sissel will be speaking to later today. But for right now, I'm going to focus on the spring 2019 data. So in looking specifically at reading, the median percentile achievement in reading as measured by MAP, the target was 75% growth or greater. We were at 62% there. Also with math, key performance indicator for year 1 target spring 2019. Looking at that achievement in math is measured by growth NWEA math. The growth would be 71% or greater. Again, we are at 62%. We are very proud of both of those. And I'm also going to be speaking to in the next slide as far as some things that we have in place to really talk about how we've been looking at data and really taking it to that next level. When it comes to SEL in reading, math, and SEL, we know that relationships are at the forefront of all of our instruction, and that is something that I just truly credit the Kingsley staff to, is how much they really emphasize that second step curriculum with SEL, and truly those morning meetings and those PM powwows, trying to connect with their students to really learn and make sure that relationships are at the forefront of everything we do. So that's kind of a highlight on strategic goal 1 there. As we dig a little deeper, like I said, when we hit 62% in both reading and math, we're kind of talking about when we dig deeper into strategic goal 1, specifically 1.4, looking at developing those collaborative team structures. So here you see on the left, you see data review days. This is something for us at Kingsley that we really have a system in place that shows that we're coming together every 6 weeks. We're talking about, are those interventions working? How do we know? It's not just this student falls at this tier, specifically at like the 16th percentile. This student needs more support. Well, but how do we know that? How do we know what we're doing is working? So that's an example of how our teams come together. You see our reading specialists, classroom teachers, EL teachers, our biliteracy team, all coming together, sitting down at that table and having those conversations. So that's a system that we've worked on implementing and really making sure that we continue conversations like that. On the right-hand side, you'll see Professional Learning Mondays. So again, this is something that we're really proud of, and we really have found this time to be very valuable. So in looking at that picture there, that's an example of our staff who we're digging into, again, looking at data through a different lens. So it wasn't just to have those conversations about looking at students who are falling between certain percentiles, but also too, that deeper conversation of those students maybe who are performing on the higher end, but aren't necessarily making that growth, their growth targets. So really, again, it was an opportunity for us. You'll see many specialists sitting around the tables. We even had our specials teachers around those tables who, are teaching our students in PE and music. They're part of those conversations too, to know these are your students in your classroom. So again, we're really proud of these systems that we put in place and really to make sure that we're keeping an eye on our data at Kingsley. So strategic goal 2, connecting with the community. We have so much going on, but we also too are constantly finding ways that how can we connect even further. So for example, as far as things that we're already doing that we're going to continue, last year we started, thanks to the Education Foundation as well as our math interventionists, we started a family math night. We know that the Downers Grove Fire Department, Police Department are both huge assets to us and ones that we utilize in our classrooms on a regular basis. Learn Not to Burn is one example. Communication, I'm going to touch on that a little bit in the next slide, but but just really, myself, along with the staff, have really strived to connect with our community, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. I'm not going to steal anybody's thunder tonight with the Education Foundation grants, but you would have noticed that many Kingsley staff members are recipients of those grants. So we're very proud of that, and just is a testament to the amount of work that these teachers put into to seek as many opportunities for our students. So we're proud of that. New this year, so continuing with Family Math Night, we're going to be launching a Family Reading Night as well. So really hitting both math and reading. We're really excited about that. Lions Club and Girls Math Club are two new clubs that our staff have started for our students. Lions Club is leaders in our neighborhood. The picture on the right-hand side may be a little hard to see, but what's pictured there is our Lions Club collected all of this candy and sent it over to the troops. So that was something that was near and dear to our hearts. Girls Math Club is talking about trying to get connected out into the community and really showing that math is just as important as reading is. And so we're really trying to continue those conversations. So again, lots of things already happening, but again, additional things on our radar that we're excited to make those further connections in the community. Speaking of connecting in the community, here you see a nice little world map. Parents being connected all around the world. So my parent newsletter is called the Kingsley Connection, and so what you see here is I use a platform called S'more, and S'more shares analytics with us to show like where parents are opening our newsletter at. And so you can see we have parents all the way out in Germany and some who decided, hey, it's time to go spend some time on the beach down there in Florida. So you can kind of see, I think this really speaks to no matter where our parents are at, whether they're traveling for business or simply just need a getaway, that we're still able to keep them connected. And down there at the bottom, that speaks to our seesaw statistics, and that's something our staff has really worked on. We have approximately 420 students at Kingsley, and you'll see here, just from January 7th to January 13th, we had 534 new items posted. So you obviously can do the math of that, 568 parent visits. So again, something we're very proud of. And finally, one last piece with connecting with the community. We are currently in the process of working with our village as well as our Downers Road Police Department on traffic around Kingsley. And so this is one of our favorite quotes here, the future of the world is in our school, and we see our two little friends here. I think that kind of sums it up nicely that there's a lot of work still to be done, but we're really proud of what we've done so far. And at this time, I'd like to invite Kim Breyer, Kingsley PTA President, up. Very good here. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mel. My name is Kim Breyer, and I am the PTA president over at Kingsley School. On behalf of our executive board, many of whom are in attendance this evening, thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you what it is our PTA has done this year and our plans for the second half of the year. At Kingsley, we support the educational needs and experiences of 420 students and work within a budget of around $63,000 a year. That comes out to be about $65 per student plus the needs of about 60 staff members. Some things that we have implemented or done this last fall that we are so proud of. Before school started, we noticed that our school needed a little facelift before welcoming our students back. So our PTA jumped in and provided the funds to do all new landscaping around about half of our school with mulch and edging and the removal of some dead bushes that the last winter had taken from us. Also, before the school year began, we implemented something that we referred to as the classroom resource grants, where we provided $100 per staff member at Kingsley to take those funds and use them for items that they may need in the classroom at the beginning of the school year. We are very proud of that. We had about a 95% participation rate from our staff members, and they were all very appreciative of those. We also started the year off with our annual ice cream social, which has turned out to be the event of the season for the kids. During that time, they're able to meet and mingle with their new classroom or classmates and their new teachers, and then have a little bit of fun. We have a face painter and a balloon artist and a dunk tank, which many of our staff members are featured in for a 2-hour span. That's their favorite part. And we also were able to fundraise around $500 to provide a new welcome mat for the lobby at Kingsley. Also last fall, we've kind of changed our focus in fundraising at Kingsley more on experiences, parent-hosted experiences, rather than crossing our fingers that we get all of those funds at one giant fundraiser at the end of the year. Our VP of Ways and Means reaches out to our parents, and they're so gracious and so they're just ready to jump in and do whatever it takes for these experiences. And we're raising anywhere between $1,500 to $3,000 per experience, which is a crazy, amazing time, and it really builds a sense of community in our neighborhood. Some other things that we obviously participated in: Halloween parties and our annual pancake breakfast and holiday shop were a big hit right before holiday break. Next week, we are opening applications for our brand new to us, what we're referring to as the Pride Grants, where, much like the Education Foundation, we're going to be awarding a $500 grant and two $250 grants to 3 staff members at Kingsley, so that they can take that money and put it back into our walls and hopefully provide a better educational experience for our students. Next up, this coming spring, the highlight of the year is our much anticipated trivia night, which is taking place on February 29th, and our ever popular mother-daughter and father-son events, and about 1 million field trips are right around the corner. As Mel mentioned, as Principal Sawish mentioned, we are working very closely at the moment with the village and the district on our traffic and safety issues surrounding Kingsley. We want to make sure that these areas are safe for our students from the second they leave their home to the second they return in the afternoon. And so I look forward, I know many of you were at Kingsley last week for our forum, and I look forward to working with you guys here in the coming weeks to make sure that we reach a resolution that makes everybody happy and make sure that our kids are safe. And last but certainly not least, while I have you all here, I think it is super important for me to stress the importance of the Board of Education and the Downers Grove Area PTA Council to come together to set some guidelines and parameters as far as what our PTAs are responsible for funding, as funding is concerned, and what the district is responsible for. While we are working our tails off, I'm sure, as you guys all are parents know, raising funds is very difficult when you are on a PTA. So we want to make sure that the funds that we are raising are having the highest impact that they possibly can on our child's and our students' experiences, rather than on things that maybe would not be the PTA's responsibility. So I really look forward to working with you, hopefully this spring, and with our district council and setting those guidelines and parameters. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Principal Sawich and to the PTA, and definitely to the Student Council as well.
A quick comment, if I may.
You.
All right, thank you to all 3 of our presentations. They were all excellent. One thing, Principal Sawich, I just want to emphasize was you made a comment in regards to your data review days, and you asked the question, how do we know what we're doing is working? I think that is an excellent question. I thank you for coming to the board and talking to us about that. It shows to us as the board that at all levels we are concerned about inputs, we are concerned about outputs, we are concerned about being accountable to our student data, and it shows me that we are building a culture of continuous improvement that is aligned from the boardroom down to the classroom, which is exactly what I think, at least I, speaking for myself, definitely want to see in the district. So thank you very much.
Thank you. For all our members of the Student Council, Member Hannes has some gifts for you, and we'd like to invite you up to the front so we can take a picture as well.
Very well rehearsed. Nice job. How are you guys?
Let's know.
I am good. So just as we have posted on board docs all of our presentations tonight, so I know this is a little dark here behind me tonight, so those are all available. If you have your devices with you, you can see all the presentations and follow along. If you're having any trouble seeing, though, there's also another screen over there on the side. So as we get into our non-action item reports tonight, we're going to start with a spotlight on our schools, the math committee update with Mr. Sissel.
Thank you. And I'll be joined by a number of our math committee members. I'll ask if you guys want to just kind of come up and we can hang out in this front row and take turns as we go through. Tonight we want to briefly review a tremendous body of work that this committee has done over many years. We want to take some time to talk about how we got to the point where we stand tonight in terms of making decisions around when to and how to pursue a new resource, and talk about then the steps through that process. And then we'll wrap things up tonight by previewing where we go from here, what the next steps are for our committee and our district in the coming days and weeks and months going forward. So I'm going to turn things over now to Katie Herkus, who's going to kind of take us all the way back.
All right, so we have a standards-based curriculum, and we follow the Illinois Learning Standards, which set our expectations and at each subject and each grade level. These standards specifically emphasize depth over breadth, and that's something that we've talked a lot about, is what that means and what we're really looking for in standards and materials that uphold that. These same standards build upon key concepts as we advance students, and we're looking for student-driven learning, application, conceptual understanding, and while sometimes those words might just get tossed around, our committee really has spent a significant amount of time understanding what that means to our students, to their learning, and to the materials that we're going to put in front of them. The Illinois Learning Standards are intentionally rigorous, and obviously with the end goal of getting students ready for college and career. So in the summer of 2010, the Common Core standards were adopted by Illinois with the implementation mandate of fall 2013. These standards not only have the content standards, but they have standards of mathematical practice. Another area that we've spent time really since not quite 2010, but not long after, understanding what they mean, both as a committee and then for all of the teaching staff in our district. In the fall of 2010, the district math committee was formed. I think most of the people that were in the district at that time standing behind me have been on the committee that long. So we have a lot of longevity. There's a lot of passion and dedication with the math committee. And then in the spring of 2012, we went for an adoption after a couple of years of research. And so at that time we adopted Math in Focus, which some people know as Singapore Math for K through 5. And we adopted Glencoe Common Core Math for 6 through 8. Both of those resources at the time said they were Common Core aligned. Given that those standards were new, we now in hindsight know that there were maybe some more labels put on things than necessarily were as true as we would have hoped. And some of that we've had to make up for along the way, but certainly we've learned a lot as well. Thank you.
So I'll take us back to 2012. During that time, we started, it was really the first year of implementation, and that's where a lot of those gaps really started to become known for the teachers. And a lot of it was really that there was pieces missing in terms of having a robust curriculum. I think that was the piece that we were really hoping for with that new adoption, was that the teachers would be able to have everything they needed at their fingertips, and that wasn't the case. So at that point, the committee really started to do a needs assessment to see where were all those pieces that are missing, and then what can we do to be able to boost that up so that we really can be as aligned to the Common Core as much as possible. That's where also we developed the curriculum ladder, which was a progression of skills, so that the teachers could look through all the way kindergarten, all the way through 8th grade, to make sure that those progression of skills were there. Then we go to the 2014 through 2016. During this time, during that implementation of longitudinal instruction, this was an opportunity for teachers who did have students that were maybe progressing at a little bit of a higher rate. They were able to, so let's say, for example, 4th grade, if I had students that were capable of doing some 5th grade level work, teacher could have a small group where those students would be working within the longitudinal instruction to do work on some of those skills as they showed evidence that they're ready for that. One of the things you might hear or might have heard of was like a snapshot assessment. There were times where teachers would be able to do those quick assessments to make sure that students were ready and they show demonstration of mastery within that quick assessment. The other part there was really reflecting on how that process really looked across the district. It might look a little bit different in each of the buildings, and that's was really what we wanted to align, was that students would get that similar experience from one school to the other, and that's where really creating that math blueprint or that scope and sequence was important, because a lot of teachers were working extremely hard to find resources to fill in those gaps, but all those resources weren't necessarily shared across the different grade levels. So that blueprint, the idea behind that was that everybody would have access to the same resources, so that if you were in one school, you would have this in 5th grade, you'd have it in another school in the other 5th grade class there. So that math blueprint was very important because it did really give teachers that scope and sequence, but it wasn't a seamless process, and that's really where we started looking at the next steps for the committee, was to be able to find resources that were consistent. It wasn't as tedious as going through the math blueprint that the teachers had been doing for the last few years. Thank you.
So moving on to 2016-2017, we began bringing in the MCMI to come in, and they did by grade level half-day trainings to help us get more rigor into our math curriculums and teach us some resources and tactics and skills to do that. We continued to keep working on the blueprint, finding resources to fill the gaps in that were not met by our main resource with Math in Focus. We talked a lot about the need to have common assessments, because as we talked by grade levels and math committee, everyone was kind of assessing differently and using different measures and looking at assessments differently, grading them differently. So we talked about how there is a need to have that consistency across the district as well. And 2016-2017 was the first year we began math acceleration, so that students that had proved able could move up a grade level in math and receive curriculum at their ability level to challenge them. Then in 2017 to 2018, that was when we actually rolled out the common and available assessments. So each grade had about 3 assessments that we considered common. They were taken online, and the data was collected to make sure that all those questions were valid. The math committee spent a lot of time going through the assessment data bank and aligning all the assessments and creating them. And then every topic had an assessment that was available if the teachers wanted to use those. We did a lot of work as a committee too, looking at how grades 3 to 5 seemed to have a valley of growth. We weren't seeing the same level of growth as we were in all the other grade levels. So everybody on the committee, no matter if they taught preschool or they taught 8th grade, was looking at why that could be. We continued to keep working on the blueprint. This was like a recurring theme for a long time. To develop it, to reorganize it, we spent a lot of time in groups over the summer, sometimes just grade level and sometimes cross grade level, rearranging the topics and making sure all those holes were plugged, or trying to. And then we continue to have conversations around how we should be doing acceleration and also how we should be using interventions to hit our extremely high learners, our lower learners, and everyone in between, to make that everyone's needs are being met.
So that brings us to last school year, 2018-2019. And I think we realized as a committee that we were hitting a bit of a crossroads. As Heather pointed out, we'd spent a lot of time as a committee working on this blueprint. A lot of work went into it, and we mentioned filling gaps and finding additional resources and looking at data, and teachers were submitting a Google form on a continual basis, pointing out areas that they thought needed improvement. The committee would put a lot of time and effort into that, and then after that the blueprint was revised, we would also have to bring that work back to the grade level teachers, because there was a change in their curricular resource for the upcoming year. So there's a lot of work on all ends of that cycle, and I think we kind of hit a point as a committee where we said, well, do we want to hit another round of that, or is it time to start taking another look at our math curriculum as a whole? And this was at the same time that our ELA resource was in the middle of rolling out, and we're also having a lot of conversations related to strategic planning and realizing where we had fallen behind in some other curricular areas, and I think we realized we didn't want to fall further behind in math. This was I believe, the 7th year of this resource being in use. So that starts to be getting a little bit long in the tooth, as you might say, where you want to start considering a refresh. So, I mean, as you look at all the questions below, these are the things that we decided. We want to work to align grade levels that are still struggling with alignment and try to do it quickly, while our teachers are working on so many other things. Do we want to figure out what's causing a score, and is it related to the resources that we're using? We had, we're a couple years into acceleration. We wanted to think about how that related to our curricular resource and how we're reviewing those things. And again, still considering how we're supporting students that were below grade level. All those things related to the resource that we're using. So we did reach the conclusion after some really hard conversations that as a committee we said it's time to start the process, especially before it's too late. We don't want to wait another year. We don't want to put more effort into this existing blueprint that we put so much more work into. That really is time to make that shift and start putting the effort into investigating what resources are out there and how it might fit into the plan for District 58. You'll notice the 3 bullet points below. You have to really think back to where we were when the math committee made this recommendation. This is the first year of full ELA curriculum implementation, a new ELA resource for all of our teachers. There's phase 2, if you remember our phases. Science was piloting that year, and the plan was kind of known and laid out to be full implementation the following year. And the Social Studies Committee was working hard, and they kind of had, it wasn't solidified yet, obviously, but they had the plan. They were next in line. That it was coming down the line that resource would also be refreshed. So it was an easy decision that the committee made, but we also felt that it was the time to move forward with it. So that math committee recommendation then had to go out to teachers, administrators, and then of course the curriculum council, which had just been formed as a part of our strategic planning process. So we got teacher feedback. We did a survey to our teachers, and we were really open and honest, understanding what's happening now. How do you feel about investigating a new math resource and potentially implementing that after science? I don't want to say the teacher feedback was clear, but I really think that there are a lot of strong feelings that yes, teachers recognize that a new resource would be challenging, but also they recognize the existing challenges of continuing with the resource that we're using. And so there's kind of a, do the challenges outweigh the benefits? And I think, and I think our teachers for the most part felt that it was worth pursuing this new math resource. So then it kind of, we got feedback from our administrators, and the administrators were really concerned about this as well. I can remember some challenging conversations we had as that group. Our administrators work with the teachers every day, and they were well aware of the challenges that our teachers were facing and the work that our teachers were putting into things. And so they were very cautious, and they started asking questions about some additional supports. And so you'll see those 2 bullet points down at the bottom. So when this went to the curriculum council, it fitted into a larger conversation that the council was already having, which is, number one, how do we kind of get into a better sequence right now, and then 2, what does a better refresh cycle look like long term? So through those conversations, we kind of lined up a plan where we're going to do science, and then after that math, and then after that social studies. And so we laid out that plan, but it was really important that I think whether it's teachers, administrators, the curriculum council, that everyone recognized that we couldn't do it with our existing resources. It just wasn't possible. We didn't have enough professional learning time built into the calendar, and there weren't enough human beings to support this. And so this is, as board members, I'm sure you remember, this is when we came to you with a couple of asks. We looked at how can we fit more professional learning time into our schedule, and a lot of work was put into getting the additional professional learning time, and I think it's proved to be really beneficial. And also the curriculum coordinator positions. I think establishing those to have additional support for these initiatives to help plan and prepare and support teachers was really essential.
So I'm happy to say that we decided to hopefully pursue a fall 2020 implementation of a new resource. We started doing some homework by looking at surrounding districts and what curriculum they were using. A bunch of us reached out to people that we knew in other districts just to get some feedback to kind of start building our background knowledge on what was out there. And we were able to come up with 6 companies. We had them come in. Those vendors gave us their presentations, and we narrowed it down to 3 resources. Those 3 resources were then the 3 that we would use to pilot in fall of 2019. At that point, we needed to make sure that all grade levels and buildings were accounted for, and so we added some additional teachers to the math committee to make our pilot group of teachers. In most cases, that was teaching partners of people that were already on math committee. And then we received our first training in June of 2019, so that we were ready to go as we started off the 2019-2020 school year with our first pilot. And while all of this was going on, we continued to research and discuss what best practices in math are. We kept talking about acceleration and intervention, so we've had a lot of ongoing conversations and a lot of learning as all of this has taken place.
All right, year 10, this year, we're finally here. We embarked on the pilot process with 2 series each for pre-K through 5th grade and 6th through 8th grade. We had representation from all 13 schools, with 46 classrooms piloting the pre-K through 5th grade series Bridges from the Math Learning Center and Pearson Envisions Math. In 6th grade, we had 7 classrooms, and at the middle school level, we had 9 teachers. Pilot for 7th and 8th grade, the 2 series Envisions by Pearson and Big Ideas Math. Last year, the math committee grade level teams intentionally picked units to use this fall to make sure our students had as smooth as transition from one series to the next. At the end of each pilot, program's pilot, the teachers were asked to fill out a 48-question survey or rubric. It was focused on these 8 bullets that you see listed on the side. It was developed by the math committee and reflects what we value in a core math resource in District 58. Teachers were asked to reflect on these 48 questions as they were represented in each series. Questions asked teachers to rate the series, as well as offered opportunity for them to openly reflect on each of these 8 areas. The math committee also felt strongly about receiving student feedback. We discussed how this would look and landed on asking students in grades 6 through 8 to reflect on these 4 questions after each series. You may wonder why we didn't ask for pre-K or preschoolers through our 5th graders. As you can imagine, those questions couldn't look the same, and we wanted to make sure we were gathering consistent data from our to make our 2 decisions.
So, from here, with a target for implementation of this coming fall, we have a few things that we need to accomplish. First, we need to actually get to a committee recommendation. And we as a district have long believed in consensus-based decision-making, which simply put says that we are going to come together and review all of that feedback, and both from all of the pilot teachers as well as the committee members' individual experiences. Christine mentioned 48 questions times 46 teachers plus 9 open-ended questions for each of those. It's a ton of information for us to digest and process, and we want to make sure that as a part of that discussion, we are really honoring and recognizing all of the experiences and all of the viewpoints that are there, with the goal of reaching consensus on a recommendation that we can all support. Consensus does not necessarily mean unanimity. I can tell you it most likely in this case does not mean that the thing that I might believe as a survey respondent or walking into that meeting will be the ultimate decision of the committee. And that's part of that process, and part of the passion of this group is that we expect a robust conversation. I would actually be concerned if everyone came in thinking the same thing. I think it's really, it reflects the individuality of our teaching staff and some of the uniqueness of the situations that they're teaching in, and it's our job to bring all of that together and think about what is best for our district in this moment and really for the next 6 to 8 years likely of math instruction. And I think everyone recognizes the gravity of that conversation, and so we're really looking forward to it. Ultimately, that committee recommendation comes to the administration, and then it's our job to bring that recommendation to you for an ultimate adoption decision. There are financial considerations. Obviously, this is a significant purchase for us, and so as we've been developing budgets over the past several years, we've been anticipating these purchases. We do have initial quotes, so we know the ballpark that we're in is attainable through that budgeting process that we've done. We've also, with the previous 2 curriculum adoptions, we've looked at deferring payments so that we can manage this over time just a little bit. As an example, we're in now the 3rd full year, right, of our ELA adoption, and we have just now made in this fiscal year the final payment on that curriculum. So that just allows us to manage this better over time. The highest estimate right now is roughly $800,000. I anticipate and hope that it will come in after negotiations with the vendors a little bit lower than that. But again, that gives us an idea of the magnitude, but also it helps us to know that we are anticipating that number going forward. The other piece that obviously is critical once we make a decision is that professional learning. We know that any new resource is an entirely new set of tools for our teachers, and so we've already dedicated the idea that our February Institute Day will really be for all staff who are responsible for the direct instruction of math. That day will be the first chance we have to train everyone with the curricular materials on that new resource. All of our vendors have got that day on hold for us. We're a significant customer, and so they're willing to do that even in advance of a contract. Obviously, they're not going to send anyone without a contract, but they're prepared to provide that. And then again, in August, as part of our opening Institute Days, we anticipate continuing that training for our teachers who are teaching math. As a committee, we are scheduled purposefully for 3 meetings in the very near future. So we're going to meet on January 15th, which is just 2 days from now. We're going to meet again the following week, and then again in mid-February. And that's because there are a series of potential outcomes to the next set of meetings. While we're very carefully thinking about how we're going to frame the discussion and all of the things we want to talk about, the agendas are very open-ended because they're going to be responsive to how that discussion unfolds. And so there's a scenario in which on Wednesday we reach a full consensus as a committee, and then we're able to just move forward. We'll present you with a recommendation on February 10th, which you will hopefully approve, and then we continue on with our professional learning plan beginning on February 28th. It's also possible, with 10 years of history and thoughtfulness behind this, that we don't reach a consensus in that first 3 hours. And so then we've kind of put in place that second meeting as a chance to come back together and continue the conversation, and a week or so in between to gather additional information if we need to. And so a second scenario is that we could reach consensus on that January 24th meeting, in which case the timing remains the same. We'd be able to bring a recommendation forward by February 10th and continue with that plan. Though I don't anticipate us being here, we have to allow for this being an organic process. And there is a scenario that we have to recognize, just as we talked about a year ago with science, that we aren't able to reach a consensus that the committee feels they can fully support. And then we need to take a few steps back and figure out how we're going to articulate our path forward. You've heard a decade of growing urgency around refining and enhancing our core resources, so I think everyone wants to see us get there, but we want to make sure that it's something we can all support. And so in that event, we would present an update and we would begin making some different plans for the February 28th day to ensure that we were able to move forward with quality professional learning. Pilot classrooms, when you initiate a pilot, you don't exactly know what materials are going to be included with that process. In this case, each of the pilot teachers received a full year's worth of material for both resources that they were piloting. So knowing that, the pilot classrooms, as we speak now, are continuing with one or the other resource, likely whichever one they happen to be using when we stopped for winter break. And so our intention is to continue in those pilot classrooms with the resource of choice once we make that decision. And so we'll be able to, we won't revert back to what would be for those students a third curricular resource in a year. We'll continue on with the chosen resource. So a couple of key points that I want to make sure we take away from tonight. The first is that 10 years is a long time. And I really am incredibly grateful and frankly humbled by the amount of work and dedication that the math committee members have put forth over whether they were on since fall of 2010 or whether they've joined in more recent years. There's an incredible wealth of knowledge and of research and of expertise in that room. And so I want to acknowledge our committee members who helped present this evening. We also have a few other, would you just wave, there's at least 3 or 4 of you, Chris and Carrie and Julie. Thank you guys for all of that. I also want to acknowledge, and James spoke really well to this, once the need was articulated to go down this path and recognizing all of the needs that we have from a curricular standpoint at this particular moment in District 58's history, we have received support from the board and from the community at every turn, and that shouldn't go unrecognized. We've put a lot of things in place over the past really 9 months or so, and just over a year ago, I didn't expect to be standing here tonight talking about math, and so it's your acknowledgement of those same concerns and support of our endeavors in that direction that has gotten us to this point. And I think the last piece that can't be overstated is we are talking about a new adoption and focusing on professional learning for math, but we're really still just getting our legs under us with science and truly with our reading curriculum, which is extremely comprehensive. And so the time that we need to do all of that with fidelity really couldn't be accomplished without the additional time in the schedule, without the Mondays, without the structures that we've been able to put in place. And I can say without hesitation that time directly benefits each child in this district, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in next month's Spotlight, but it's worth recognizing as we talk about moving forward with another comprehensive curricular adoption that this time is critical. So we thank you for that as well. And at that point, that's the end of the prepared presentations. I'm happy to take any questions from the board.
Not really a question so much, but just a comment, and it kind of piggybacks off of what you just said, Justin, about 10 years is a long time for teachers to work on this, and also for teachers to go without a very structured or fully formed, implemented curriculum to work with. And I think that all the teachers, the committee especially, but every teacher who teaches math in the district should be given a lot of credit for working so hard to make sure that our students were still provided with the highest quality math education they could possibly get, putting a lot of their own time, effort, outside of the school day, outside of the school year, to make sure that happened. And I think that that's just really important to recognize, and I want to definitely say thank you for all that hard work. I know as someone who taught a subject that didn't always have a lot of resources and had to kind of fly by the seat of your pants, I think it's difficult, and they did an excellent job with what they had available to them, and I just want to put my appreciation out there to everyone who worked so hard. So thank you. Thank you.
What she said. As a copy mom for many years, making 4 copies of this math worksheet, 2 copies of this math worksheet, and so on, I know firsthand as a copy mom how hard the teachers have worked. And as a parent, before being on the board and sitting up here, I used to sit out there asking for this stuff too, and knew how hard all the teachers were working. So thank you to the math committee, but also thanks to all the District 58 teachers for making an awesome product at the end of the day after 10 years of not necessarily having the fully implemented thing. So thank you very much.
I'll just share that in my experience working with other districts and just seeing how they go about curricular adoption, this is the playbook for how curricular adoption is done well. So just kudos to Justin, you and your team, and everybody else that's worked on this, because other districts should be looking at this as the playbook for how to adopt curriculum in a really thorough and inclusive way.
And I had a question kind of going back to year 9, one of the slides. If we could pop up slide 10, is that possible? It really jumped out at me. I think it was great that we acknowledged we kind of had this aha moment that we wanted to kind of shift gears. But I think there's 4 questions at the bottom there that I would actually be interested in kind of what our answers are at this point in time, and do we expect those answers to kind of remain the same regardless of what resource we end up choosing?
So the first question obviously was acknowledged in yes, now is the right time to move forward, right? That alignment was sort of wrapped into that first question. That was the work that had been being done on the blueprint. And again, I think we need to, we're honoring all of that work too that happened. That relative cause, one of the realizations that our teachers had after, Heather spoke about spending a lot of time on looking at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade blueprint that we had using, at that point the blueprint consisted of the materials we had purchased, which in that case would be Math and Focus, and then other free resources that we're able to find online. And so there are a couple of free curricula out there. And what starts to happen then is you're teaching from a number of different lenses, because so you lose some of that cohesion. But even with all of that, what our committee members found was that, and that's sort of where that fall of 2018 started, they had exhausted what was out there that wouldn't require an additional investment. And so I think our answer to that question and that dip at that time was, we are acknowledging the gaps in our scope and sequence and the lack of resources at our disposal to consistently and with fidelity fill those gaps. So I think at that moment, that's how we answered that particular question. Now, I think that's a question that comes up over and over, for sure, and it's part of our, it should be part of every data conversation. Those last two questions are on, I think, every math committee agenda over the past 5 years and will be going forward. And our hope is somewhat concurrently with a resource recommendation, maybe not next month, but as we reach the end of this year, to really align a lot of those questions and practices so that we do have some more consistency and either we either renew and reaffirm decisions that were made, or we refine them a little bit based on all the information we have over the past several years. But the reality is that before we can truly talk about acceleration and intervention and measure that effectiveness, we have to have a core curriculum that is robust and meets the standards and meets all of those needs. And so it really kind of all happens at once. Once we make those decisions about what our core resource will be and what our core instructional path will be, then it becomes not easier, but it gives us a clearer guidance point to say, if we're starting from here, then this is how we're going to extrapolate in either direction from that core resource.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? Well, we greatly appreciate your due diligence, and we really are looking forward to a upcoming recommendation. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have another spotlight of our schools with Megan Hewitt on the Education Foundation grants.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to present here tonight. In addition to being the Community Relations Coordinator for District 58, I also serve as an ex officio member of our Education Foundation, and it's a great privilege to participate on that group. There are many really truly dedicated community members on the Education Foundation. Some have children in the district, but many, if not most, don't. They're just really passionate about District 58 and Downers Grove and ensuring our students have the best access to resources. So I'm excited to share with you our teacher grants, which is one of the biggest programs that the Education Foundation supports. So our teacher grants are a very visual it's a visual type of presentation. So I have a lot of photos that illustrate our grants, but I also wanted to present the information in an even more visual format. So I created a slightly unconventional type of presentation for you this evening in a Prezi format, showing a simulated type of classroom that incorporates all of the grants into them, just to add an extra visual for you. So first, about the Education Foundation. They formed almost 20 years ago to support and enhance education here in District 58. They support a variety of programs. The Teacher Grants program is their largest program, but each summer they host an orientation program for 7th graders into middle school called Sneak Preview. And they also welcome our new teachers by treating them to lunch. Reaching New Heights is a stipend that they provide, a small stipend that they provide all of our principals at the start of the school to use at their discretion. In the spring, they contribute a large portion of funding for the Reaping Games, and they also lead the Select 58 Awards program for 8th graders who exhibit excellence in service, and the Distinguished Service Awards for staff. And actually, applications for both of those programs will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. They get the majority of their funding from a few key fundraisers. Oktoberfest in downtown Downers Grove in September, the Harlem Wizards game, which takes place every 2 years, and the Green Apple program, which just finished up its holiday campaign, and that is an invitation to the community to make a donation to the foundation in honor of a special teacher or staff member. And they raised about $1,000 just in November and December through this program. Total, they've donated more than $500,000 back to District 58. Specifically about teacher grants, all teachers and staff are invited to submit an application with an idea that they have that would enhance education in their classroom or workspace. And the foundation reviews each application on a blind basis, meaning that they do not know the identity of the teacher or staff member who applied. All the applications must show how it aligns to our curriculum and strategic plan and have the measurable outcomes. And this year, we're really happy that the foundation awarded 16 grants to 24 teachers, totaling more than $14,000. So we'll get right into the different grants, divided by topic. First of all, the foundation awarded 4 grants that relate to English language arts. First of all, we have 2 grants for middle school classroom libraries. The first was awarded to Deb Roach, who is a resource teacher at O'Neill. Her grant will provide books that are that contain a middle school subject matter, but are at a variety of reading levels. So that way, students who might not be at grade level can still find a book that's engaging to them. In addition, Nicole Ferroli and Kate Nickel are both ELA teachers at O'Neill. They have received classroom library grants from the foundation before. They've been very diligent each year applying for a grant and coming up with different creative ways to make their grant applications stand out. And this year, they received books that are specific to diversity and really enhancing their students' knowledge about multiculturalism and the different diverse cultures we have. So there's a couple photos. You probably see it a little bit better on the screen. Also, there were 2 grants that focused on increasing student access to books. The first was awarded to the biliteracy team at Kingsley, Cindy Rodriguez, Karina De Leon, Cristina Diaz, and Maria Cervantes Blanco. Their grant provided for a traveling classroom library. Students can pick books in English and Spanish to take home and enjoy with their families. Many students in the biliteracy program have families who are also English learners, so this provides a good opportunity for both the students and their parents to enjoy a book in either English or Spanish together. Christina Forsley is the teacher librarian at Indian Trail, and her grant was for large print books. She demonstrated how research shows that books in large print can help engage readers, especially students who might have disabilities or who might be reluctant readers. And she shared some photos. It's kind of hard to read, but this one says large print books support reluctant readers. And this one, I believe, says large print books makes reading easier. And she had a whole series of these photos with different students and different signs, but the feedback she's received has been very positive so far. Next is math. The foundation awarded 2 grants that relate to math. The first one relates to these 3 objects. The first is a math dry erase board. The second is a mental math mental math game. And the third is a base 10 magnetic kit, which helps students visualize math concepts in a 3D way. And these games and others were awarded to Christina Gamboa, Melissa Ekdahl, and Tracy Rasmussen from Kingsley. They really wanted to identify ways to make math fun. So these games are not only very educational, but they're also very entertaining. Here are some photos they shared You can see the students are very engaged in all of the photos and actively participating in the different activities. So the other math grant is was awarded to Katie Herkus. She is the interventionist at El Sierra in Kingsley. And actually, this is the second year she received this grant, and it was referenced in Ms. Sawish's presentation earlier this evening. But her grant is funding family math nights at both Kingsley and El Sierra. It's a family math night is an opportunity after school for parents and siblings and students to come together, enjoy some math activities together. The students really have fun sharing what they're learning in math with their parents. It also promotes community within the school, and it builds both parent and student engagement. So it's really a big win-win. Ms. Sawish can attest to that, and I'm sure Mr. Lin could as well. So these photos are from last year's Family Math Night, and I know Katie is excited to host it again this year. The next topic is flexible seating and movement. If you look at this segment of the classroom simulation, you'll see a few traditional chairs, but you'll also see this strange, slightly different looking chair, wobble seat. It's an example of flexible furniture. 5 teachers received grants for flexible furniture in their classrooms, mostly for flexible seating. All of them made really compelling arguments in their applications regarding the research beyond flexible furniture. It's essentially providing different types of seating in a classroom and allowing students to choose where they want to sit. They can change it up a bit. And that beyond student choice, it increases movement and agility. And research finds that it helps improve student focus and decrease classroom distractions, and it's especially beneficial for students who might struggle with focus on a day-to-day basis. So the grants were awarded to Michelle Sanders at Pierce Downer, Genevieve Hahn at Herrick, Colleen Condon at Kingsley, Kate Blackburn and Mindy Werner at Kingsley, and Kate and Mindy, their grant not only provided flexible seating, but it also provided a whiteboard table, so students can do work on the table, directly on the table, and then erase it when they're done and then start over. So it adds an extra element of collaboration. And then lastly, Katie Gallagher at Kingsley. So off to the side in this classroom simulation, you see a hopscotch patch. It's just one part of the new Kingsley sensory path. Oh boy, you can't really read that over here. Looking over here, Christina Gamboa and Michelle Schmidt received a grant to build a sensory path. It's called a Hop, Skip, and a Jump sensory path. It's a really large school hallway pathway that contains several different activities to get kids moving. It builds hand-eye coordination. It helps build spatial skills. It can be certainly used in a general classroom setting where in between lessons it provides students with a good break where they can go out, do some wall push-ups, do some hopping, and then do hopscotch. But research shows that it actually has the best benefit with students who might have sensory issues or who might be on the autism spectrum. And I know several of our schools have implemented similar pathways and have seen great success with it. At Kingsley, they are in the process of installing it this week. So here are some of the installation photos of their hallway, and they're excited to get it finished and get kids using it really soon. Our next grant was awarded to Caitlin Choinsky and Kyle Winter at Highland. The two of them lead a yoga club for students. It's a morning club, and they found, research has found that not only does yoga have physical benefits for students, but it also has academic benefits and emotional benefits. So they've sponsored this club for a few years now, and their grant supports the purchase of yoga blocks do enhance their instruction. So that's a little visual of, I mean, it's pretty simple, but that's what a yoga block is, and it allows them to do a few new things. Our final grants don't quite fit into the other categories, but they're each creative in their own way. The first was awarded to Mary Laversky from LC Era for Pebble Go Next, which is a research database for intermediate grade levels. District 58 funds Pebble Go, which is the original version of Pebble Go, and it's geared towards kindergarten through grade 3. So we fund that, I believe 2 modules for each of our elementary schools. Mrs. Laversky had great success using Pebble Go for her youngest students, so her grant will fund the continuation. So the Pebble Go Next, which continues that research for your 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. Here's just an example of what one of the lessons looks like. It's a really great resource where students can do a deep dive on different topics and highlight information and extract really valuable information. And it teaches some of those good research skills. Next we have this cute little bumblebee. It's actually called a Bee-Bot, and it was awarded to Irene Jackson from Leicester, the Leicester teacher librarian. And she received a few Bee-Bots to use with her primary students. Bee-Bots are robots that introduce students to coding and computational thinking, and helps them develop some mathematical thinking skills that will really serve them well as they build upon their mathematical knowledge in older grades. Here are a few photos that Ms. Jackson shared of her primary students using the Bee-Bots. They were a huge hit. The students love them. It helps that they're really cute too, especially for that young age. Okay. And then our final grant recipient, Deanna Jacobs, is a Kingsley 6th grade teacher. And she had a really interesting idea for a grant this year. When she started the school year, she really wanted to do something that would promote a positive environment within her 6th grade classroom. And she thought about it, and she developed a grant proposal that would fund 7 different stations or activities. And she is dedicating the first 10 minutes of every school day to these activities. Students can choose what activity they want to participate in, and the activities range from science maker spaces to independent reading to educational games with students, with fellow peers. And she found that not only does it get the day off to a positive, happy start, it also gets students to participate in activities with other peers that they might not always hang out with. And it also promotes the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. So it's a really cool idea. And here are some photos of her students participating in those activities. And just for the visual representation, I included a Makey, which is one of the activities that is part of her STEM Makerspace station. A Makey is an electronic circuit board. You can hook one side up to a computer and the other side up to virtually anything and turn it into a keyboard or a piano. For instance, you can hook it up to a banana and turn a banana into a piano. It sounds insane, but it really inspires a lot of creativity and also engineering type coding skills for kids in a fun format. That's just one example of the things the kids can do. So thank you for your time. Thank you, education. I would be remiss. I know I saw Brianna here from their Education Foundation, and Carolyn Kellum, who is our grants coordinator. I will be asking them up for a picture with our grant recipients shortly, but I want to thank, first of all, Caroline for putting the program together. It is a ton of work to get it all coordinated, so thank you so much for doing that. Thank you for your support, Brianna, and then thank you to all of the grant recipients this year. It takes time to put together a grant proposal, and I've seen them. There's questions, and they have to demonstrate what they want to accomplish, and everyone who's here did a fantastic job. You can see some of the outcomes already, so thank you very much. So then questions, and then we can do a group picture. I think that sounds good, so thank you.
Any questions? Well, thank you so much to the Education Foundation, and congratulations to all of those who received the grants. And yeah, welcome on down and take a picture.
You should probably stand.
Yeah. I don't think so.
Are we trying
No, not us.
Megan, do you want to?
Oh, I think we were.
It's time for a stand anyway. Can you start some coverage? Yeah.
I like stand on stuff. I've never liked
My turn to hear.
What are you gonna say? Thanks.
Just tell me what to do.
Wait, nobody's gonna know I was on the stairs. Can we open the doors? I'm always turning my head this way. Give me a neck.
Oh yeah, from
Right,
the.
because I'm looking this way. I'm like, we need something this way as well. What? My neck is starting to hurt from looking this way.
I slipped on my pillow wrong.
Oh, I hate that. And I have a new pillow and I have a new mattress and it's still, I have to go to a chiropractor.
I just got a new pillow. Very exciting stuff.
All right, now to our last non-action report. We're going to welcome back Justin Sissel here, talking about the winter data snapshot.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
This truly is going to be a snapshot, not just because it's the third spotlight on one agenda, but because winter data really traditionally is sort of that mid-year checkpoint. While there are norms and while it is a quality piece of data for us to look at, we also want to make sure that we really are thinking of that full year of growth and achievement when we're looking at things. So tonight we are going to look at the map reading and math data. We refer to it as winter 2020, but really again that's the administration that just happened in actually December of 2019. We have a couple of new things to look at this particular winter. One is to compare our winter achievement with those key performance indicators. Obviously we'll talk about how it's not exactly apples to apples, but it gives us an idea of trajectory toward those targets. And also this year we know that we made the decision not to administer MAP testing in the fall district-wide, and so while we have since really the inception of MAP in District 58, we've always talked about growth from a fall baseline perspective. So when we've talked about any growth point, we've been referencing a fall data point. And so beginning right now, we do not have that fall data point to reference, but we have other ways to look at and consider and reflect upon our student growth as well as achievement. We know that we use MAP data across the district, the building, the classroom level. Again, as I mentioned, we always want to be looking at growth and achievement side by side because both are critical measures. Achievement tells us at this moment of assessment, where do I stand? Growth tells us how does that relate to a fixed point previously. And for a high achieving district like ours, it really is important to be looking at both of those measures as we go across. I'm going to intentionally move right through the next several slides. These are definitions that I include in the presentation for those who access it as a print version. I'll go through verbally what these are and what they look like, but I don't want to pretend, I want to purposefully move through those. The two I do want to highlight before we get to the numbers, just a reminder, this is the second year that we've moved our winter benchmarking time frame. For many years we did that winter benchmarking now, which is why we would typically review the data much later on the board calendar. Our winter benchmark period for MAP is the 3 weeks prior to winter break. And so, and we made that decision really to put some distance between that winter benchmark and the administration of the Illinois Assessment of Readiness, and to kind of make sure we were avoiding assessment fatigue as best we could for our students. The other thing that's worth noting, this is not, it doesn't have a major impact on the output, but this fall, as Dr. Russell and Dr. Eichmiller and I were on a conference call with NWEA, really trying to talk through the way we've been presenting data and how we've been looking at it, we've been calculating student median performance percentiles, right? So you've seen those numbers for years. The third grade median percentile is 72 or whatever it happens to be. And there are a couple of different ways to arrive at that number. And so we have been replicating the way that had been happening since 2013 up until last spring. And in the conversation we had through MAP, we've learned that there is a slightly more precise way to make that calculation. It essentially removes a little bit of rounding error, is really the simplest way I can explain it. I don't think it calls into question any comparison we can make over time, but I also think anytime we make a shift in the way we are analyzing data, we want to just make an awareness of that. So from this point forward, we're using a slightly more precise method of calculation to reach that median. When we ran comparisons side by side, we're not talking about more than a percentile or two, and often we're talking about no difference at all. So I want to bring attention to it, but I don't want to overstate it. I just want to make sure that we're aware for the sake of full transparency in the way we look at that data. So, looking at our sort of moment in time snapshot, we look at the average percentile across grade levels, we look at that median percentile. Again, those two different measures of central tendencies, each are valuable. Median we've looked at since the beginning, average or mean we started to look at a little more recently. They're close in some cases, and then in other cases they're a little further apart because a certain pocket of students performing at a certain level can pull away from that central measure. Overall, though, when we look at those percentiles, those are some pretty solid numbers. I mean, to see a median percentile that is above 71 across the board at each grade level is really exciting. And that, again, is borne out by that achievement percentile column. Remember, that's what tells us when we look at our actual, our median achievement or our average achievement, how does that relate to all of the other schools who take MAP testing? So that, in first grade, for example, that's, I have to read the numbers over here, that 75th percentile puts us in the 93rd percentile when compared to all of those other schools. So again, our individual achievement related to the rest of those schools. The two that are shaded in blue are the growth measurements, and this is where this is new data, so we haven't looked back historically at all of this, but now we're looking at this moment, if we want to know how much growth have our students attained as of the winter assessment. The way we would reflect on that is to look at their previous winter score and compare it to this year's winter score. MAP will give us a winter-to-winter growth projection. And so that first column tells us how many students or what percentage of students, at each grade level met or exceeded that growth projection from winter of last school year to winter of this school year. And again, looking across that column, those are also some really high numbers. We always have to remember that MAP really is normed at 50, and so anything above 50 truly is a celebration. When we get up into the 70s, that's a mark of significant achievement. So we're really excited about that. Again, borne out by that conditional growth percentile, which talks about where our growth is in relation to all of the other schools' growth during the same time period. Always worth noting the outliers, that 27th conditional growth percentile in third grade is something to notice. One of the things, though, that we do take into consideration is that this is just, that's one of the, in third grade, it right now looks like an outlier score. And we haven't looked so much at that winter-to-winter growth percentile, so it's something that we want to make sure it does not bear out. But when we look at the achievement percentiles and the growth from that cohort in subsequent slides, it doesn't seem to be something that is part of a trend. Looking then at achievement over time, we can see years upon years of that data, and again, tracking the cohorts diagonally. One of the things we're starting to look for now in our reading data in particular, we know that we're in that second full year of implementation. So often people will talk in a first year about an implementation dip in scores. That is, we're learning new resources, we're becoming more comfortable, and so it's not uncommon to see a slight dip in achievement before you start to realize the gains from a new curricular adoption. And so if this bears out in the future, it's actually kind of exciting because you can see there is almost that dip consistently from winter 18 to winter 19, but across each cohort diagonally from winter 19 to winter 20, we're seeing growth or very, within 1 percentile of movement. So that's an indication of a positive trend that we want to keep watching for, that I'm going to start to say we can begin to attribute to that second year of that resource adoption. Again, that's those same numbers in achievement percentile tracking in the same way, so those are going to relate to the medians. And then to take a look at math data as well. Again, when we look down that column of mean and median percentile, still strong scores. We're still seeing those same valleys comparative to our own scores in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then a little bit of, or really 4th, 5th, kind of from 3rd through 6th. Those are the same gaps that we identified, Steve, that we talked about in terms of we've recognized that we are still working to fill those resources. The exciting thing is, though, as the kids stay in our system and get into 7th and 8th grade, we see those achievement scores jump right back up into really, really high areas. So again, that's a very exciting thing for us to see. And then again, looking at math achievement over time, we continue to see this year again, we are seeing growth or maintenance in every cohort from winter of last year to winter of this year. Again, that's as you track the scores diagonally. So that's an exciting thing for us. We also know that we're on the cusp of something new with math. So there is some pilot influence into this. Perhaps it's tough to quantify what that might be, but there are a decent number of our classrooms who have been engaged in that pilot process. And again, that achievement percentile historical picture as well. A new component for us this year, as I mentioned, is to take a look at our key performance indicators, knowing the targets we've set for spring, and stop and think about where are we at this moment compared to that spring target. And this is a new conceptualization for all of us in the district, quite honestly. And so as we look across in reading, our target for spring of 2020 is that the median performance for the median achievement percentile at each grade level is 78. That's sort of our on track to hit 80 in the following year. And so as we look, we have a couple of grade levels that are right there or a little above, a couple that are within a percentage point or two, and a couple that are lagging at this moment district-wide. And so that's a first glance at, okay, what does this tell us at that winter checkpoint, knowing what our spring target will be? This is something, again, we can look at this district-wide. As we talk about how do we move closer to that spring target, it really it will have to get down into the building level. These are conversations where we're looking at high-level data here, but then we do want to share that distribution and talk about it with our principal team, and I'm going to talk in just a few minutes about some of the ways that we can look at working toward continuing to move toward those KPIs. Similarly in math, our targets, remember, are a little bit different because our end goal is 77 at the end of the following school year. So our checkpoint target is the 74th percentile. Again, right now, about half of our grade levels at or above that, and actually it's 4 at or above and 5 at just below or a little bit further below. And so again, we know in some cases with math, we know that we're hoping to see greater gains with the new implementation of a resource, but that doesn't mean we don't take a look at our current students, where they are in our system, and how we can address those. And so one of the questions we often get then is, how does all of this translate into action? And I think Ms. Sawich did a really nice job of talking about some of the questions and detailing some of those conversations that happen. But also, when we think about systematically looking across groups of students and thinking about where do we want to place some additional instructional emphasis to be able to see some of those gains happen. This is a little small on the screen, but I may actually just walk over here. One of the things you can see on this is a sample school, and each color represents a grade level. And the quadrant represents growth and achievement on these axes. So essentially, and let me do one more, and each dot represents a student in that grade level. Okay, so if I'm a building principal, I can take a look at this, and this gives me a quick view, and then I can actually look at who the dots correspond to, of what growth and achievement looks like in my building and for each grade level. And so what we're looking at with those quadrants, the upper right quadrant is where we want to see the most dots. That is our high growth, high achievement quadrant. So that the students that are represented there are high achieving and continuing to grow at or above the 50th percentile. Down here at the bottom left, those would be our low growth, low achievement, and then you can kind of figure out how it works from there. And so the scatter plot tends to show us where is growth headed, and really where do most of the students tend to fall. And so we look at grade 5 and we might say, well, it's not going up. Shouldn't it be going up? And really what that's telling us is, no, actually it's saying most of the students are living there. So most of the students are finding themselves on the high growth side of the scattergram in 5th grade. Whereas over here, the 2nd grade trajectory looks to be super high, but the reality is that the kids are scattered a little more across the board in terms of where they are. And so this is the kind of information we're going to be providing for our building principals and really walking through, and I'll tell you that many of them are already using this in several ways, because it's another way to look at those two measurements, growth and achievement, next to each other. And so as we think about providing additional support and intervention, or even thinking about our core instruction, we can say in certain grade levels, we're seeing a ton of achievement, but not as much growth for certain students, or any combination there. So it's tough to get into the granular level when we're looking at district data, but I wanted to provide at least one example tonight of a way that we can take some of these broader numbers, break them down into individual students, but then in a way that's meaningful to think about grouping instruction and targeting some of those resources. Our next steps from here, again, we take this back to buildings. Many of our buildings have been involved in data meetings over the past couple of weeks, where they're thinking about not only individual students who need support, but really thinking about what does this data at a grade level and at a building level tell us about what's happening with our core instruction. We really are able to drill down into, are there patterns we're seeing for the students in building A at grade level Z, and what can that tell us about some things we can talk about going forward. We're also having a lot of conversations as a district about growth and how we want to be sure that we're looking at that accurately. NWEA will give us a couple of different ways without fall data to look at growth. And one that we've talked about tonight is winter to winter. So last winter to right now tells us how far I've come. There's also a spring to spring target. So that's based on last spring, and that's something we'll report out on a little more thoroughly actually in the spring, because again, that gives us sort of that at the point when the most instruction has happened to that same point in the following year, sort of that full year point. And so we can consider that as a potential target. MAP also gives you a winter-spring target, and so that can be useful in some cases for some intermediate goal setting based on my score in December. What should my score be in May? We want to be careful to not overinterpret that, because it's the smallest window of time, but when we're talking about individual student targets and teachers working with that, it's another tool that is available to them. And again, we're going to take a look at those key performance indicators and break that down not only by district but by building and grade level to just have an idea of where we stand right now as we start to think about the direction that we want to continue to grow going forward. But I think overall we're seeing some really strong numbers, and we're seeing some good progress towards what we've acknowledged are our ambitious key performance indicators. Are there questions I can answer for you?
Good.
I like the last thing you shared around individual student goal setting. I think there's an opportunity there for us as a district to continue to figure out what the right recipe there is for us to engage our students in this data as much as we all look at it. And so thinking through the ways in which we can pilot that concept and what's already working in the district to make that a standard that all of our students are just used to, so that by the time they get to 2nd, 3rd grade, that's just a normal part of testing, something that I also own, not just that my teacher looks at. And so I like the fact that we're talking about that at our data meetings and buildings. I just like to see that go. I like to see us consider going district-wide with it.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. And there's, like, as you mentioned, there are a number of individual approaches or group approaches or building approaches to that. I think it is a fair next step for us to think about a district-consistent approach to student goal setting.
Other questions?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, listed on tonight's agenda are 8 communications received by the board. Are there any individual or additional communications board members would like to share at this time? Okay. Well, then let's move on to some reports to the board. We'll start with the superintendent report with Dr. Russell.
Given that we have 3 spotlights tonight, I'll try and be brief, and the full report will be in board updates. But before I go further, I want to echo something that Karat had said earlier. Justin, the entire math committee has done a fabulous job. I've been a part of so many curriculum renewals, I've lost count, but the thoroughness from which you and the team has approached this is very much appreciated. I know the community, and I feel very confident in whatever the team decides, that it has been thoroughly researched, put into practice with our kids, and we are going to have a great math curriculum moving forward. So I really appreciate all the hard work, and that does not go unnoticed for you and the entire team, and not just the math committee, but also for all of our classroom teachers who also were piloting these materials, having those good conversations. It's a lot of work, and being married to a math teacher and knowing what elementary teachers go through every single day, because it's not just math they're planning, it's ELA, it's all the other subjects. Thank you to our teachers for all their hard work, and we're looking forward to getting you the materials that you all need to be successful for our students. So thank you. Also wanted to give a shout out quick to our Education Foundation. I know Caroline is still here. This is a fantastic group that I've been blessed to be a part of as the new superintendent. I cannot tell you the effort that this group puts forward. It's a small group, but it's a powerful group. We have a meeting tomorrow night at the Downers Grove Library at 5:30. If anyone is interested in participating, we're always looking for new people, and it is just a great group that's dedicated to doing nothing more than giving our students and staff more opportunities to expand the curriculum offerings that we have. So I really want to thank our Education Foundation, and Megan, job well done on your presentation as well tonight. I love that Prezi format, and thank you very much. You did a great job with that. Piggybacking off of curriculum instruction, you got a little bit of a sense of the district and how we're focusing in on what I like to refer to as a continuous improvement model. Over the next several months, the administration team will be going through what we call cycles of inquiry training with the Regional Office of Education. Justin and I have a meeting on Wednesday with the ROE to finalize what that process will look like. And really the emphasis there is working with our building leaders who are strong instructional leaders to begin with, and then taking all of us to the next level, asking those right questions for our teachers and for our students to really impact their growth and achievement. So that's really the work that we're going to be putting forward. We didn't want to wait until next school year to start a brand new school improvement process. We wanted to make sure that we were fully trained this spring, so as we kick off the 2021 school year, we're already ready to go. So by the end of the school year, as we discussed before, at the November meeting, I said I would be back here in January talking about what our plan is moving forward. So we have 6 training dates to really work with the Regional Office of Education to get all 13 buildings on the same page when we're talking about school improvement and continuous improvement. By the end of the school year, Justin and myself will have fine-tuned all of the forms and set meeting dates for our schools to follow. So we're really looking forward to taking school improvement to the next level behind our instructional leaders at the building level. So that's something I think that with standards-driven curriculum on top of continuous improvement, that's a real good recipe for taking the district to the next level. So we're very excited about that. In terms of finance, the Financial Advisory Committee met last Friday. You will get an update a little later on, but one of the things I want to share with the community is just how hard this group is working. I think we had over 20 people at the Financial Advisory Committee on Monday, and it's a great representative group. And one of the things that we're all recognizing is in order to continue to do great things in District 58, we have to build our fund balances up for 2 reasons. One, we never want to be in a situation where we're in what's referred to as short-term borrowing because we can't make payroll at the end of the year due to our tax receipts when we get them in DuPage County. The second thing is our facility needs. And yes, we do have a citizen task force working on facility needs, and we may or may not be coming to the community, in November and talking about that. But one of the things that we have to get back to in District 58 is having that facility or capital fund. So when we do need to fix things at our building, whether that's a roof or a parking lot, we have a mechanism to pay for that versus continuing to put these things off with our aging facility. So fund balance is going to be something that's extremely important to our FAC group, but also to the community as a whole. If we don't start doing that, we are going to be in serious trouble down the road. I want to commend the past few boards The district went from deficit spending to budget neutral spending, and now we're in the phase where we're saving money and putting it aside. So that's been some hard work that previous boards have done and this board has done. We need to continue on that path. So that's certainly something that we are emphasizing. With facilities and public relations, I'm combining those two for my report this evening. We are now embarking on our second Citizen Task Force meeting with our facility plan that was born out of this strategic plan. And so we will be meeting at Herrick Middle School on Wednesday, January 22nd. It's going to be a longer meeting. We're going to start with a tour of Herrick Middle School at 5:30 so the task force members can get a sense of what middle school looks like in a 7-8 building and what it looks like in an aging facility. We will then come back as a task force and really dive into this concept of 6-8 middle schools and how we want to pursue that based on the recommendations of previous committees and previous work that was brought before this board in the spring. So we are looking forward to having those conversations. For anyone interested in the community who wants more information, Megan Hoot does a very nice job of putting this all on our website, so you can go through the agendas for our Citizen Task Force meeting, but also for all the other facility work that the Board of Education and other groups have done up to this point. We really hope by the time June rolls around that the Citizen Task Force will give a recommendation to the Board of Education about where or where not to go, as we get into the summer. The one thing that I want to continually speak to the community about, as we go through these Citizen Task Force meetings, as we have broader community engagement meetings, we are going to be asking questions, not for the sake of riling up the community, but if we're going to embark on perhaps asking the community to spend tens of millions of dollars in our facilities, we have to have difficult conversations that we've put off in our community because they tend to rile people up. So things like, should our two middle schools have close to equal enrollment versus having one bigger school or one smaller school? So that could touch on a boundary question. Please note, I'm not saying we're changing boundaries, but I'm saying we are going to be having conversations like that. We're going to have conversations about whether our current model makes sense. Does it make sense to run 2 administrative centers and 13 individual schools? Are there different ways of doing that? We're not saying we're necessarily doing anything differently, but we do have to have those conversations. As soon as you have those conversations, though, rumors tend to swirl, people get upset, the line for board meetings can stretch around the block, and so we all have to just make sure that we have those conversations. I think Craig Young made a very good point. It may have been at the August or September meeting that these questions have to be brought up. Again, we owe it to our taxpayers to make sure that we turn over every single stone, so if we do go ask questions of our community, they can come back and with confidence and say, have you asked this, have you looked at that, and the answer will be, yes, we have. Again, doesn't necessarily mean we're going in that direction. That's why we have a group called the Citizen Task Force to really help advise us on many of those things. And not everything will be answered by the task force, so I do anticipate that some of those questions may have to come back to the full Board of Education as well. When we look at personnel for the update this month, believe it or not, this is the time of year, and I know it kind of makes you scratch your head, where we start running 2 school years at the same time. So we're concluding the 1920 school year and we're starting the 2021 school year. So Jane Uzentis in the personnel department will be working with building leaders to talk about staffing to make sure that we get those optimal class sizes, but also always make sure that we're being good stewards of the taxpayers' money. With staffing overwhelmingly the biggest part of our budget, that is something that we need to make sure that we get it right. The district leadership team has given us some good guidance in terms of where to set the parameters for our class sizes, really trying to avoid those larger classes historically that we've seen over 30 in combination classes. So we've got some work to do to make sure that we can hit those targets to the best of our ability. In terms of technology, the Innovative Learning and Technology Committee has been meeting with Dr. Eichmiller, and they're going to be working on a recommendation for staff devices. They're also going to be talking about student devices. So just kind of a heads up to the Board of Education and the community. No decisions have been made yet, but I do anticipate decisions or recommendations being made to the Board of Education so you can make decisions later on in the spring about what that looks like. In terms of student services, I see Jacqueline in the back there. The Grove Preschool will be hosting winter open house at both of our winter open houses, at both of our locations at Indian Trail School and Puffer School, Puffer will be next Wednesday, January 22nd, and then Indian Trail will be the 23rd. If you don't know about our preschool, it is a gold-rated preschool. It is something we are extremely proud of. Our staff does amazing work, and whether you're considering our preschool because your child may have special needs, or whether you're just looking for a preschool for a general education student, please consider giving the Grove Preschool a really good look, because it is fantastic, and many of you in the room have children who go there, and so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Also, in terms of student services, again, in the theme of we're starting next year already, later in the spring we'll have kindergarten roundup. If you do have a kindergartner or know someone who's coming into kindergarten, please put them in contact with the school. The more we know our kindergarten numbers, the better it helps us with staffing for the upcoming school year. So again, the earlier we get information, the more equipped we are to make really good decisions in terms of where we're going. We sincerely hope that all of our staff and families had a great winter break. It's hard to believe we're already halfway through January, but here we are. 2020 is going to be a pivotal year in District 58. A lot of things are coming to a head with our strategic plan and our citizen task force, so we're excited about that, but it will be a pivotal year in the district. As a reminder, all of our schools will be closed this coming Monday for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and in honor of Dr. King, I'd like to conclude my report with two education quotes that I always try and keep in the back of my mind that Dr. King shared with us. The first one is, intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. I think that really helps sum up what we do here in District 58. And then finally, the function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. So again, that's where I'd like to conclude my remarks tonight, and you can't get any better than Martin Luther King Jr. So thank you, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. All right. You're already on your way up, but on to some monthly business with Todd Grayfall.
Not used to sitting that long. You have in your packet the year-to-date report. It is halfway through the year. We did review this as well as some other things with, as Dr. Russell pointed out, with the Financial Advisory Committee on Friday morning. We are doing well. Looking through as we go through expenses are in line with what we've seen in the past, and in some areas a little below. A couple areas are a little bit higher that we're kind of watching than expected, and we have some increases coming. One piece I pointed out to the FAC, and I'll point out here, is if you look at transportation fund, we are behind where we were last year at this time by a couple $100,000. The 2019 budget number of 1.75, which you see on that expense piece, is actually a little misleading. This is on a cash basis, and there was a prior year bill in that part. So when you take that bill out, we're pretty close to flat even year to date with the prior year. That's an important piece for us, and very hopeful, because we increased transportation about 4.5% from last year in budget, anticipating increases due to contract increases and so forth. But we've also done and worked hard to find efficiencies in routing and structure and restructuring some things. And what we're seeing, we think we're seeing, and we're hoping to see, is a trend that that efficiency has helped negate some of those increases that we anticipated. And that bodes well for going forward when we're looking at, as we budget for 21, that we'll be able to at least keep, and we don't know what the new increase will be yet. We're working with our neighboring districts that we work with, that is District 99 and Woodridge Elementary, that we share a contract and services with them, and we're working with them in our vendor first student. But it's a hopeful thing that we won't have significant increases there, or at least we'll be able to absorb those within the budget framework. So other than that, revenues came in. We actually, I mentioned at the FAC meeting, I left before Christmas, and when I came back the first day in January and I ran the new revenue report, there was a considerable amount of new revenue coming in from the state, and that is because the state made another disbursement of the reimbursement claims at the end of December, so we have 2 claims in for this year, which is a little bit ahead of previous years, but it's a good sign, seeing that the state is being timely in their distribution of funds to the district. So that's a helpful piece. Other than that, you have coming up as an action item the acceptance of the audit. You have the independent auditor. Betsy's here to talk about that a little bit with the board. That was reviewed as well at the FAC meeting on Friday morning. So with that, if there are any questions. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You may sit back down. Okay. All right, so then first committee update will be the policy committee with Member Weiner.
We met right before winter break with a member from IASB, and we answered a full battery of questions that helped kind of inform our draft of the upcoming policy manual. When the draft is complete, I think the first draft will come next week. Is it at the next week's meeting, maybe?
He said, yeah, hopefully toward the end of January, so that's
Okay.
what we're hoping.
At our next committee meeting, we'll break into our working groups and take each part of the different policy sections and go through it, as well as the district attorneys going through it. And so we're hoping to get that going here in the next month. So just answered a lot of questions for ISB to tailor it, so.
Okay.
That's it.
Any questions?
With the adoption of Press Plus, when should we expect that wave of potential policy revisions to come onto our agendas?
So our goal is to really have that by the end of the school year. We're anticipating about a 90-day period with our different subgroups to really focus in on that. So that comes to June, and then one of the things that we'll have as a board is questions that from the policy committee. We'll talk about whether or not you want that all in one reading and then second reading and third reading, or how we want to adopt that. But our goal is to have this up and running before the start of the next school year, which would mean getting that to the Board of Education about May or June.
Thanks.
All right, and then with that, we'll move on to the legislative committee with Member Doshi.
Sure. So the legislative committee met in December to start to plan out the legislative breakfast. For those that aren't familiar, legislative breakfast is, so while the NFL has their Super Bowl on February 2nd, the legislative committee, we have our Super Bowl either February 7th this year or February 21st as a backup weather date. We have confirmations from 3 of our area representatives to attend, and we're looking for more acceptances to come in the weeks to come. We talked a bit about our legislative committee's breakfast at our meeting, primarily focused on 2 things: what the format of that space should be, and then also what topics we should be addressing with our representatives. We came to conclusions on both of those and are excited to continue to improve that space to make sure that we're making the most of that time. It's a really unique space. For those that have been there, it's a really unique space for folks across the community that are interested in how policy is made and the legislation that goes along with it, to talk about issues that are facing us as a district or us as a community. And so the topics that we're considering, just so everybody has it, is the pension cost shift, capital funding, school safety and mental health needs, secure entrances, unfunded mandates, charter schools, seclusion and isolation practices, and upcoming education issues that might come up between now and the legislative breakfast, as we're still about a month away. And so Megan always does a great job on framing what the right questions are given the latest policy proposals that are happening in Springfield and in the U.S. Department of Ed and federal legislator. And so we'll talk about narrowing on a few questions to ask of our representatives at our next committee meeting later this month, and prep for either the February 7th date or the February 21st date, depending on weather.
Fantastic, thank you. Next committee is the Financial Advisory Committee, which I will go ahead and update everybody on. You got a little bit of update there from Todd regarding our general finances. We did start, as we do every meeting, with a little bit of a review just on the general health of our finances. We also did a review of the MRF. It's currently, right now, distributions are higher than the deposits, but we expect to see a little shift in that right now. In January now is the start of the new term, so, and they had an increase in the premium as well, so therefore, the deposits will be getting a little bit larger, and now, as people are going to meet deductibles and things like that, we suspect maybe some of the costs to be a little bit lower right now. We're going to be reviewing and accepting the fiscal year 19 audit. Just for all of our newer board members, it's just, as everybody's had an opportunity to look at that, it's just always important to remember how different this looks than our typical budget, because it has those additional obligations that are actually on the state, but they get rolled into our district, our portion of it. So you see tens of millions of dollars more included in that statement, and it shows a 10-year deficit for the school district, which is all tied into the IMRF and the TRS, are two pension components to that. So those liabilities are put into that budget as well, so you'll see that. There's some stuff in there as well regarding, like, the MRF, like, it jumped up the liability on it this year. That has to do with actuary tables. If you have any questions, we can talk about that further with Miller Cooper here in a little bit. We had talked last year about moving to a CAFR, which is a much more detailed audit. That includes not anything really more on our individual finances, but has additional, like, statistical information, 10-year statistical history of our district, but then also takes in, like, statistics of sort of the surrounding area as well, the village, surrounding districts, and things along those lines, to kind of help give a big, broader picture of what we're doing. We weren't quite ready to do that this year, but they're hoping to potentially do that next year. One of the things that Todd was able to point out is a few years ago, we switched our accounting program, and reporting out of the old system is very difficult, so getting 10 years worth of statistics isn't as easy as running a simple report out of a system. We did spend a lot of time on the fund balance policy. That's something that we're hoping to see set. The goal, I think, is to get somewhere around 30% in our fund balance policy. In our fund balance every year, have a policy trying to get us to a 30% model. This is, as Dr. Russell spoke about earlier, really to keep us to a model where we're safe during those low periods, where we're not getting revenue, because most of our revenue comes in two big chunks. So we have that March, April, May, kind of wherever that dip is, right around there. So we had a lot of dialogue around that. This meeting actually was very engaging. We had a lot of discussion. It was fantastic. So that was good. We discussed the supplemental bond levy. A handful of years ago, there was a bond that went out, and there was a decision made by a law firm that we no longer use, but that kind of based on what their projections were for growth and stuff along those lines that weren't met. So therefore, technically, we have a maximum amount that we can pay out, and so we are actually that we can put into that fund. So that fund is actually running in the negative right now, so we're going to have to put supplemental bond levy together on that. So you'll be seeing that come along, as well as we talked about it last month, but that property tax relief opportunity that we have does not necessarily make sense in our district because we are a low property tax area here. What would we save, like 300? We would get 300,000 back, we'd give up 1.4.
We'd lose money.
So that would not work very well for our district. It would cost us somewhere in around $1 million, a little over $1 million a year in revenue. So we actually had a lot of dialogue going on the fund balance policy and a couple of other things, to the point that we may throw an additional meeting onto the calendar as well. Normally we do one every other month, so you may hear another update from us soon. With that concludes my report, unless there's any questions.
two questions.
Yeah.
The health insurance premiums being higher in December, is that a year-over-year number, or just December was higher than previous months?
Our, no, not year over year. It's higher, the distribution was higher than the deposits.
Oh, higher than deposits, but
The premium did increase, the premiums increased in December because we're paying a month ahead, and the rate increase that was approved was 6.4%, and that it takes effect for that January 1, but payroll the payroll starts in December, so that you're paying ahead. So there was an increase in deposits that'll come in December, and then hopefully what we'll start to see in part of the, when you're looking at the MRF fund, you'll see distribution drop off as people have, well, first off, there's switches over to the HSA, but you'll also have people starting over their deductibles. So those initial bills that'll come through, some of them will be larger onto the individual versus the district of that piece.
and that's what we attribute the disbursement being higher than the premiums, or do we see a spike?
You'll
in
see that second
claims?
part coming up in the next month or two. The other piece is just the increase in the premium piece, starting because of that 6.4% increase.
Okay. And then the other question, in the discussion about fund balance,
Yeah.
what was the conversation on the side of, if there was the side of like, no, we shouldn't be starting to accumulate a fund balance? What were the arguments on that side?
Well, we have a fund balance. We always have. We couldn't not do that. And it didn't really go specifically in that direction of should we not be trying to hit this target number. I think most people recognize that we would get into a cycle of having to do tax anticipation warrants or short-term lending, and we didn't want to do that. The dialogue was really around what other districts are doing, how they manage their books, so stuff along those. So we looked at policies from some of the surrounding districts, like 99 and Glen Ellen and a couple of other ones. So we were looking at what that did, and then we had some discussions on what we were worried the impact might be if, are we talking about, are we going to, is this going to involve cuts, or is this going to involve slowing down our growth? Our revenue tends to grow a little bit every year, so are there things that we can sort of hold steady right now instead of doing a cut? So it was kind of, what is the impact of some of this stuff going to be? And we were sussing that out a little bit as we put a policy together. Nobody necessarily looking to say, in that particular meeting there, saying, no, we shouldn't be looking to keep that fund balance policy around the 30%. I think most people felt that was comfortable, especially looking at the other districts that we were comparing against.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question about, from either of you gentlemen, to explain a little bit better that bond issue? Are you saying that we've exceeded our debt service extension base?
So what happened is several years ago, the legal opinion that was issued allowed the district to use inflation for its debt service extension base and project out. The district bonded according to that. However, in those future years, that inflation number did not materialize. So several years ago, when the Lester bonds were adopted and moved with, all of that was adjusted. So what you have now is the bond levy is within its legal limits of the debt extension service base. However, the debt is exceeding that amount. So each year you see right now, if you look at the debt service fund, it's negative. Debt service funds are not traditionally ever in a negative position. We end up positive at year end, but right now between payments we are negative. So what we leveled off the debt levy, and as inflation grows, we're able to go back and recapture those things. So what you'll see is at the February board meeting is a resolution to adopt for the 2019 levy, which we can still put a bond levy on before and file it by March 1st, to increase that to that inflation number, which is I think $50,000 or whatever that is. It's in the memo that's in there. And I don't want to go off the top of my head. That's for the 2019. What we will know shortly in the next 2 weeks is what that inflation number is for 2019 that goes for 2020. And so you'll adopt the supplemental levy both for 2019 levy and the 2020 levy. So you won't have to do another one next year because that'll be set. We know what that'll be. So you'll then have that supplemental for 2 years to help recapture that differential, what inflation has allowed the district to grow by. And then going forward, we'll continually work on that piece. We will also be able to go back and recapture those funds, if the board so wishes, at a later date, to recapture those funds that we were not able to levy against what was paid out. The debt sits out there and it just goes forward. So once that, the levy starts to drop down and inflation keeps going up, you'll be able to recapture that differential down the road, and so that we can make that fund whole. It's a cash flow issue right now, essentially. Obviously it doesn't help our overall position, but we're not transferring funds in, permanently into that fund to cover it out of other places. It's just a cash flow issue that we have to deal with.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you very much. Anything else? Okay. The district leadership team did not meet since the last board meeting, and neither did the health and wellness. So we have no discussion items tonight since we had 3 spotlights. So we're going to go ahead and move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to share public comment with the board, but is not intended to be a time for members of the public to enter into a dialogue with the board. Issues raised during public comment may be added to future agendas or addressed by administrative staff as appropriate. A reminder, criticism of individuals is not in order. The board has allotted 30 minutes for public comment this evening. We ask that you please keep your comments to a 3-minute limit to allow everyone the opportunity to speak. Have we received any cards? So far, we have not received any cards. So if you have something you would like to say, please step up to the podium and state your name and your attendance area. Okay. Is there anyone that needs a recess? Okay. All right, with that then, let's move on to the approval of the minutes. Are there any suggested revisions to the minutes as presented in the packet of materials? All right, if not, is there a motion to approve the minutes for December 9th, 2019 regular board meeting as presented?
So moved. Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carried to approve the minutes of the December 9th, 2019 regular meeting as presented. Next up, we have our consent agenda. Are there any items board members would like to have considered separately? All right. If not, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of the personnel report and financial statements consisting of the list of bills and summary as presented in the packet of materials?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Melissa, please call roll.
Member Olczyk.
Aye.
Member Samanti.
Aye.
Member Weiner.
Aye.
Member Doshi.
Aye.
Member Hannis.
Aye.
Member Harris.
Aye.
Member Hughes.
Aye, motion carried. The consent agenda has been approved as presented in the packet of materials. We have a few items up for action tonight, starting with the fiscal year 2019 audit report. Is there a motion to accept the fiscal year 2019 audit report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right. So we got discussion. Welcome on up. Yeah, I couldn't see quite with the glare. Thank you for your patience tonight. I know it's kind of a long one.
Good evening. I know I didn't meet with the Finance Committee on Friday morning. I was out of town, so Susan Jones, the other partner that works with me, was there to meet with the Finance Committee meeting. I did follow up with her, and I know that they did a lot of detail look into the financial statements and went through things, so I'm going to sort of take a different route a little bit and just sort of explain our audit process to you quickly, and then just point out a few things within the audit report, and if you have any questions that didn't get answered From your report, I'd be happy to answer them and then look at our 2 letters quickly that we also released. But feel free, as I'm going through, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as we're going along. So I thought I'd start out with, like I said, talking about the audit process and why you even have an audit. So each school district in the state of Illinois is required to have an annual audit by an accounting firm in Illinois. There's also certain requirements that we have to have as a public accounting firm and qualifications to perform these audits, as the Illinois State Board of Education requires that we perform these audits in accordance with government auditing standards. Realize, too, that the purpose of our audit, too, is that for us to obtain a reasonable assurance about whether financial statements are free from material misstatements. Our procedures that we perform during the phases of our audit allow us to render an opinion on the financial statements. Within the financial statements, starting on page 1, which is probably the most important part of your financial statements, is our independent auditor's report. And again, this year it is an unmodified, clean opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can give as auditors. So just sort of the first phase of what we do when we do an audit, we come in prior to year end to do the planning phase of our audit. And this is where we're really looking at evaluating the controls. We're looking to determine that your controls are operating effectively. We do this by doing walkthrough procedures of certain cycles that we look at. And by doing those different procedures that we're looking at, that helps us design our audit procedures that we come back and do when we do our field work. After year end, and I can't remember exactly when we came in this year, August, September, I can't even remember, that we came in to do our field work. And that's where we're doing our substantive testing on different areas that we've looked at, from our planning stuff to give us information that we need to look at. We also look at other areas too, districts that have P cards, credit cards, travel reimbursements. We look at sort of those as some risky areas. So we also take time to look at some of that information also. Then at the conclusion of our field work, we assist the district with preparing the deliverables of financial statements and other communications to the board. After those deliverables are complete, they are reviewed by the manager and the partner on the engagement, as well as a technical reviewer within our firm. At this point, then, we provide the district with all drafts of the deliverables before they're issued in the final form for your guys' review and acceptance, and then all the required filings are done with the Illinois State Board of Education and any other agencies that require those filings. And as I said before, the Financial Advisory Committee has already gone more into depth in these financial statements, but there are a few things I do want to point out. Like I said before, on page 1 of the financial statements, that is our independent auditor's report. And like I said, that's the main part of the audit report. Also on pages 5 through 12 is the management's discussion and analysis. I always tell people that if you don't want to read all 100 pages of the financial statements and don't really understand the finances, the management discussion analysis is a great summary of the audit report. It gives some financial highlights. It describes the different statements that are within the basic financial statements, so you can understand the differences between the different types of statements. It has some condensed financial statements in there that come from the basic financial statements. And also remember too, that part of the document is prepared by management and reviewed by us. And lastly, on pages 22 through 69 are the notes to the financial statements. That's where there's a lot of detailed information that really gives more of the background of the numbers that are reported within the basic financial statements. You pointed out the information on the TRS and IMRF and OPEB liabilities. There's many, many pages of notes within there that describe the actuarial assumptions and how those numbers are shown, along with the district share and the state's proportionate share when you have a cost sharing plan. So there's a lot of very detailed information within those notes to help you understand more what's reported within the financial statements. And then just lastly, we do have 2 letters that we issued. One of them is our required communication to the board letter. Here it just states that we've done our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, in accordance with government auditing standards as required by the State Board of Education, and also uniform guidance, which is where the district has a single audit performed where you expend more than $750,000 in federal funds. On page 2 of the letter, it talks about any new GASB statements that will be adopted in the future. There were no new statements adopted this year. Next year, there is GASB Statement 84, and GASB is a Governmental Accounting Standards Board. I'm sorry, I use acronyms a lot, just in case for those that don't know. But GASB 84 is with the fiduciary activities and the reporting of the student activity funds. We are still waiting for some guidance from the State Board of Education, working closely with them, so we will continue to communicate with Todd as we get more information on that. And then lastly, we had no difficulties in dealing with management when performing the audit. I'd like to thank Todd and his entire staff for they're always very cooperative, makes things go efficiently and smoothly, and work real well together with our team and his team. And then lastly, on December 13th, management did sign the management representation letter in order for us to release all the final deliverables. The other letter that we issue is our control deficiency letter. I'm sure you've all had a chance to read that. I'm not going to go item by item. If you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I know Todd provided some management responses in regards to the letter, and we will continue to work with the district on any of the issues that were found within this letter. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything.
Any questions?
Lots of
Thank you so
information.
much.
You're
We
welcome.
greatly appreciate it, and we greatly appreciate your patience tonight. So. With that then, Melissa, please call roll.
Member Doshi.
Aye.
Member Hannis. Aye. Member Harris.
Aye.
Member Olchik.
Aye.
Member Samanti. Aye. Member Weiner.
Aye.
Member Hughes.
Aye. Motion carried to accept the fiscal year 19 audit report as presented. The next up is the 2020-2021 school calendar. Is there a motion to approve the proposed 2020-2021 school calendar as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Melissa, please call roll.
Member Olchik.
Aye.
Member Samanti. Aye. Member Weiner.
Aye.
Member Doshi.
Aye.
Member Hannis.
Aye.
Member Harris.
Aye.
Member Hughes.
Aye. Motion carried to approve the proposed 2020-2021 school calendar as presented. Next up is the 2020-2021 school fees. Is there a motion to approve the school fees for the 2020-2021 school fees as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Tongue twister.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
All right. Any discussion on that? Okay. Melissa, please call roll.
Member Olchik.
Aye.
Member Samanti. Aye. Member Weiner.
Aye.
Member Doshi.
Aye.
Member Hannis.
Aye.
Member Harris.
Aye.
Member Hughes.
Aye. Motion carried to approve the school fees for the 2020-2021 here as presented. We got a couple of announcements. Tuesday, January 14th at 6:30 p.m. is a building tour and PTA meeting at Bel Air. Tuesday, January 21st at 7 a.m. is the Policy Committee meeting over at the ASC. Wednesday, January 22nd at 3:45 p.m. is the Legislative Committee meeting over at the ASC. Monday, February 10th at 3:45 p.m. is the District Leadership Team meeting over at Longfellow, followed by on Monday, February 10th, 6:30 p.m., community coffee with the board right here at the Village Hall. And then Monday, February 10th at 7 p.m. Will be the regular board meeting, again, here at Village Hall. The board will now meet in closed session. Is there a motion to move to closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of a specific employees of the district, 5 ILCS 122C1, the placement of individual students into special education programs and other matters related to individual students, 5 ILCS 122C10, and the discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, whether for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by Section 2.06, 5 ILCS 122C21.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Melissa, please call roll.
Member Harris.
Aye.
Member Olchik.
Aye.
Member Samanti.
Aye.
Member Weiner.
Aye.
Member Doshi.
Aye.
Member Hannis.
Aye.
Member Hughes.
Aye, motion carried. The board will now move into closed session after a short recess.